Ever look at a massive, sprawling, decades-old vineyard and think, man, how did those vines get so incredibly strong? Well, the secret actually lies in what happens when they're practically infants. The entire lifespan, the resilience, the yield of a vine, it's all basically determined by the actions you take right at the very beginning. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into the ultimate guide on how to prune young vines in their very first year.
So I've got to ask you, do you want a long-lasting and fruitful vineyard? Of course you do. But here's the crazy part. The secret to decades of healthy fruitfulness doesn't just come down to having great soil or a ton of sunshine. It literally lies in mastering this very first pruning. If you get this wrong, the plant is going to struggle for years. But if you get it right, you set up a structural architecture that'll bear incredible fruit for generations.
To make sure you get it exactly right, here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with an introduction to pruning, cover the tools and prep, and pinpoint the exact timing you need. Then we'll dive right into a step-by-step guide, followed by crucial aftercare, and wrap the whole thing up with some expert tips. Let's jump in!
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, an introduction to pruning.
Now, we kind of need to reframe how we look at these early cuts. Pruning a young vine isn't just about, making a plant look pretty. It is the ultimate tool you have to direct its energy. In its early life, a vine's only real priority is survival. We want it to build this massive root system, not a bunch of weak surface shoots. So we do what's called first-year pruning. But here's the catch, and this is super important. This critical structural cut is actually made in the spring of the vine's second year. The vine is planted, it survives its first summer, makes it through the winter, and then as it heads into its second spring, that is when we make our move to establish its framework.
Moving right along to Section 2, Tools and Preparation.
Okay, so knowing what we're trying to achieve, let's talk gear. You might be tempted to just grab any old pair of garden clippers from the shed, but please don't do it. Poor tools can completely doom a vine before the season even starts. You need sharp pruning shears, pruning saws for the older wood, and most importantly, disinfected blades. I really can't overstate this. Your blades have to be razor sharp and absolutely clean. A dull blade doesn't cut, it crushes, and crushed tissue heals terribly, creating the perfect little entry point for devastating fungal infections. Seriously, treat this like a surgical procedure.
That brings us to Section 3, timing and conditions.
All right, so your tools are sanitized and sharpened. Now the weather dictates our every move, because making your cut at the wrong time of year is a fatal mistake. There's this big debate out there between autumn and spring pruning. Now, if you prune in the autumn right after the leaves fall, the vine actually buds earlier the next year, which sounds pretty great, right? But there is a massive risk. If a deep winter frost hits, those newly cut buds have zero protection and they can be killed off completely. Spring pruning, on the other hand, is without a doubt the safest choice. By waiting until late February or March, you preserve the vine's strength and you protect those delicate buds from freezing to death.
So here is your absolute golden rule of thumb. You've got to prune after the heavy winter frosts have passed, but strictly before the active sap flow begins. In the vineyard world, this sap flow is beautifully called the crying or the weeping of the vine. If you wait too late into the spring and the vine is just actively crying heavily from its cuts, you've waited too long and you actually risk weakening the whole plant. Timing is literally everything.
All right, here is the main event. Section 4, our step-by-step pruning guide.
We've got the tools, we know the timing. This is where we actually walk out into the vineyard and make the cuts. Let's break this down into 3 precise, actionable steps. First, take a good look at your young vine. It probably grew a couple of different shoots over its first summer. You need to identify the single, strongest, healthiest shoot, and you are going to remove the weaker ones completely, totally flush to the base. Step 2, on that single strong shoot you just saved, count exactly 2 visible buds. Some people call them eyes, starting right from the base. 1, 2. Step 3, make your cut just above that second bud, but at a very specific angle.
Now you might be wondering, why the angled cut? Honestly, this is one of the coolest little details in vine biology. When you cut the vine, like we talked about, it will eventually cry sap. If you cut it flat or angled the wrong way, that sticky sap is going to drip directly down onto the delicate little bud below it, literally suffocating and drowning it. By cutting at an angle sloping away from the top bud, the tears drip safely down the back of the stem. It's a tiny, tiny detail, but it makes a massive difference in the plant's survival.
And pay close attention to your shear technique here, because this is something even experienced growers get wrong sometimes. Look at your pruning shears. They have a sharp cutting blade and a thicker, blunt supporting blade. The sharp cutting blade must face the main stem, meaning the part of the plant you are keeping. The blunt blade should press against the top part that you're throwing away. This makes sure the permanent stub is sliced cleanly and the delicate tissue isn't crushed by the blunt edge of your shears.
Okay, before we leave the pruning techniques behind, I have got to give you a massive warning about a huge rookie mistake. It's called green pruning, which is the act of removing summer shoots, leaves, or side growths. Do not do this in year one. I know it's incredibly tempting to go out there and tidy up the vine in the middle of summer. Don't touch it. A first-year plant desperately needs every single leaf it can produce. Those leaves are basically solar panels, generating all the energy required to build that massive, deep root system underground. If you cut the leaves, you literally starve the roots.
Shifting gears to the future, here is Section 5, Care After Pruning. So, you made the perfect spring cuts, right? And you didn't touch those summer leaves? Awesome. But your job isn't over just because the shears are put away. Over the summer, you have some specific maintenance to do. In June or July, and then again in August, you need to remove the dew roots. Dew roots are these shallow, surface-level roots the vine tries to lazily grow right at the top of the soil. You actually have to carefully dig down just a bit and cut these off. Why? Because if you let the vine rely on those shallow roots, it will quickly die the second there's a drought. By removing the dew roots twice a summer, you force the plant to drive its main tap roots incredibly deep into the earth.
And then, as the leaves drop and autumn rolls in, it's time for mounding. You'll literally cover the base of the vine, including the graft union and those precious two buds you so carefully pruned, with a thick mound of soil. Guys, this is a non-negotiable, mandatory pre-winter survival tactic. That mound of earth acts as thermal insulation, protecting those sleeping buds from deadly deep freeze winter temperatures.
Which brings us to our final stop. Section 6, Expert Tips and Conclusion.
Let's distill all this amazing agronomy science into a cheat sheet for you. Here are the golden rules for success. Number 1, absolutely no green pruning in year 1. Let those leaves grow wild. Number 2, cut to exactly 2 buds in the spring of the second year, and remember that angled cut. Number 3, clear out those shallow dew roots twice during the summer to force deep rooting. And number 4, always mound the vine with soil before the winter freeze hits.
Now, a quick professional disclaimer before we wrap up. We have covered the gold standard for vine pruning here, but you really should always consult local horticulturists or agricultural experts. Vineyard microclimates, specific grape varieties, and your local soil conditions can vary wildly, and the local pros can help you fine-tune these rules for your exact region.
And that wraps up today's explainer. I want to leave you with one final question to think about. Are your shears sharp, and are you ready to guarantee your vine's future? You now have the exact knowledge you need to walk into a vineyard and build a foundation that will literally last a lifetime. So go sharpen those blades, respect the timing, and set your vines up for decades of success. Thank you so much for learning with the explainer today, and we'll see you next time.